This episode was sponsored by MPB, the world's largest online platform for used photo and video kit. Visit mpb.com. Hey folks, in this episode of the podcast, it's all about Nikon or Nikon, depending on what side of the pond you're on. I'm going to be speaking with my friend, Mr. Matt Granger, one of the experts in that brand. This is TWiP. Hey, welcome back to another episode of This Week in Photo. I'm your host, Frederick Van Johnson. This is going to be kind of an interesting conversation today because there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and there is a very specific reason why Matt Granger, who used to be many moons ago known as that Nikon guy or that Nikon guy, if you have him pronounce it. And we're going to be talking about that camera system, and some of the different bodies they have in there and why this guy, Matt Granger, thinks their new flagship camera may be one of the, if not the best camera on the planet. Matt Granger, welcome to This Week in Photo, man. How the hell are you doing?
Thank you. It's good to be back. I always have fun chatting with you. Always learn some new technology, pick up some new app or something that I should be doing better in my business. So I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, I'm great. I'm healthy and in hotel quarantine at the moment. So apologies for the kind of retro inspired background. I'm halfway through a 2-week hotel quarantine here in Hong Kong.
Yeah. So if folks that are watching the video, if you notice a little stuttering in Matt's video, that's why, because he's on hotel Wi-Fi somewhere. So, but the audio sounds
also
good.
Making excuses for me. I may also, I don't know the chance. There's a small chance I'll get a knock at the door for a COVID test. They come at random times. And for people who think I'm snacking whilst we chat, I'm actually drinking my coffee out of a ramen cup. So apologies for that. I ran out of coffee cups.
Oh my God. You are in jail. Are you making like a hooch in the toilet over there? Like, what's going on?
So you joke, but because they deliver meals here and it's often at inconvenient times for me, I bring it in. And then there's no microwave or anything in my room. So I've got one of those column heaters, I think it's got oil in it that like takes an hour to heat up and then just kind of radiates. So I put my boxed food on top of it and then cover that in a towel and leave it there for an hour to warm up my meals. It's like making grilled cheese on the thermos or something.
Oh my God! See, that's the irony of it all. You'll get out of there COVID free and then pick up some other calamity because all that stuff that
you just get hepatitis or something.
Oh my God! Well, let's talk about the topic du jour, man. So the topic today is Nikon Z9, however you want to pronounce it. And basically the new mirrorless cameras, they're not even new anymore. They're a couple of years old, but the flagship mirrorless cameras in the Nikon line, they're up to the Z9, the Z7 II, and the Z6 II, right? Those are that's kind of the constellation of pro level cameras that we have to choose from on the Nikon side right now. You are bullish. I've been watching your videos over the past, week or so. And before that, but in earnest, with intent over the last week, because I've just purchased a Nikon camera, which we'll talk about. You're just kudos to you, man. The way that you approach doing videos and the tutorials that you have and the courses that you have up there are very easy to approach. I feel like you're just sitting here right next to me, like showing me the back of your camera and saying, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah, set it like this. So kudos to you for doing that. So tell us off the top, why are you moving back, or why have you moved back to this system? Because you were with Nikon, then you left and you came back again. Why did you come back to Nikon?
Well, yes and no. So let's just rewind it because I guess not all of your audience will follow my YouTube videos. And I have a feeling that people often read the title, see the thumbnail, and don't actually listen to the whole content anyway. So now that I have a platform, lock the doors, I'm going to make a speech. Yes, I was that Nikon guy. I'll try to refer to it as Nikon for the rest of this show. I self-proclaimed myself that back in 2011 when I started my YouTube channel because I've been a Nikon lover and I had a bag full of equipment and I thought that's what I'm going to be testing and using mostly when I make videos. So why not capture that audience? Probably 4 or 5 years later, I got some advice from a friend that was essentially, what's the upside, what's the downside? So if you're not, his questions to me were, are you looking to become an ambassador? And when I thought about it, I thought, as glorious as that would be, no, because then I couldn't be impartial and say what I want, do what I want with all equipment. And not, I don't think I'm in, the kind of photographer that Nikon would ever consider anyway. But then what's the downside? The upside is it potentially brings in Nikon users to the channel. But the downside is maybe it alienates non-Nikon shooters. And, if I called myself that Ford guy, then Chev definitely won't work with me. But potentially IBM wouldn't either, because they may not want to work with someone who has another trademark in their name.
Yeah.
So I just went back to Matt Granger at that time. But from probably 2005 or 6 through to now, I've always, my primary cameras that I've been shooting with has been Nikon. Just, it can get lost in the mix because I'm reviewing and testing all kinds of stuff, and I am a total gear whore. So often when I'm testing the latest and greatest from different brands, I am personally and professionally torn. Oh, do I want to get one of these? It's so nice. But over the years, I've added Leica to my kit, and I've had some Sony cameras in the mix. It's generally been when they did things that my other kit didn't do for me that I wanted, not just for a folly. Well, the Leica stuff was kind of an indulgence. It was I enjoy shooting with it for personal stuff. I like the results. I love going out for a day with it. Business is going well. I'm going to treat myself. It's actually a funny thing when I was saying this on another live show recently, that as a photographer, your work is photography, but then for most of us, it's also our hobby. Whereas you don't have accountants who just like to balance books in their spare time just for a laugh. So there is that kind of sometimes blurring of what's a work tool, whereas what's a personal indulgence. So what are we, 2022? When I was living in New York in the middle of the first wave of the pandemic, I was shooting with D850s at the time, and I was due, according to my gear schedule, to upgrade that year sometime. But I wasn't traveling. They were barely getting used. The market for DSLRs was still strong, but I hadn't moved to mirrorless yet. But I thought, if I'm going to consider my options, now's a good time. I can sell them whilst the market is still high. And I'm in such a fortunate position at that time that I was across the water from B&H Photo, so I could loan anything I wanted to test out. So I sold off pretty much all my DSLR gear except for my 200mm f2. I figured that's one that I can't see them replacing anytime soon, and I just couldn't bear to part with because I love that lens so much. But I did sell other key lenses in there that I absolutely love, because I thought, it turns out down the track wrongly, that Nikon would never make an AF adapter for mirrorless that would work well enough to justify keeping them. But they have. The FTC2 is amazing. So hence, I've rebought the 105-1.4 new and taken a hit on having sold it and rebought it, but worth it in the end. Then I had pretty much tested everything already for YouTube, but I went through and I tested the Canon, Sony, Nikon, I'm sure other brands and models in there as well, options. And finally, not just objectively because it's better, but because I personally find the ergonomics and the menus familiar and comfortable, and I love shooting with that equipment, I went out and bought a pair of Z7 IIs. And the 24-70, which I think you have, it looked like that's what was on your camera you flashed me earlier, which is spectacular. No shade on any other brand. Pretty much all of them are great. The Sony one isn't great, to be honest, but the rest of them are outstanding. But I think the Nikon one is hands down the best 24-70 anyone has ever made. It's just unbelievable, and it's a focal length I use a lot. So that was the honest, not hype, not for YouTube version. I sold it at the right time. I looked at my options. I decided to buy into Nikon again, and I bought it. I've never been sponsored by Nikon. I've never been given a free camera or a lens. So I rebought into it because that's what works for me. They had been behind on a lot of the latest tech, like autofocus and video specifications. And for me, the Z7 IIs and the Z6 II, I have a Z6 II here, but it's actually a long story, but it's on loan from Nikon USA, and I don't have a way to get it back to them conveniently. Are up to the level that I want, and then the balance of features just works for me. So that's what I've been using since late 2020. And then I am fortunate now, don't be a hater, to
Don't do
have
it.
a pair of the Z9s.
Oh, I hate you. I hate you. That's just
Yeah, that's fair.
not. It's just not fair. And you're in a hotel room. You can't even use them right now. That's not even
But
fair.
there's windows nearby. Like I said off camera, you're wearing a hat when you have a perfectly good head of hair. So I can have two Z9s in a hotel room.
That
Deal
is
with it.
completely
I
not
can't get
related.
plugs in here either. It is. It's about overkill and having more than you need. You got
Well, you know what?
style and
You
you
can
still
buy a
got hair.
hairline,
So
Matt Granger. You can go buy a hairline. I'm just saying. If you wanted to, you can take some of that money, get rid of both of those cameras, and you could buy a hairline. That's all I'm saying.
well,
you know,
once travel opens up, I may just stop by Portugal and do that. If you see me with these luscious golden locks, or you know what, I might even go for a perm. If you see
there you
that
go.
happen, I'll admit it.
Live your best life, Matt Granger. I'm curious though. You're in a really good position to answer this question. Having, like you said, you're a gear whore, right? And you're familiar. In all seriousness, you're familiar with the flagship cameras from a bunch of companies. You know what they have to offer. You know where their shortcomings are and what they excel at. But still, you netted out on the Nikon side, and you stuck with the Nikon brand. What is it about the Nikon brand? All things they all make spectacular images, right? There's very little headroom in these cameras these days that we're going to bump our head up against because we're looking for a feature that's
Yeah.
not there. So why Nikon? Why not Sony? Why not Canon or Fuji or Panasonic or someone?
So happy to answer any question you've got for me, but for the audience, I just want to make two caveats. One, I chose to buy in at around the end of 2020, as I said, and things have changed since then. The Z9 wasn't on the radar then, the Sony A1 and the R3 weren't out at that time, so that's when I made my choice. And my answer to that question has to be personal. I'm not saying this is what's going to work for everyone, but when I looked at them, so I think the R5 was out at the time. And what interested me in that one was, I mean, their autofocus is great. All of the cameras will do the job. So it's like being spoiled for choice. Do you want a Lambo, a Porsche, or a Ferrari? It was any of them will do the job, period.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess a big part of it is just there is a difference in ergonomics that if you've used something for 10 years, it just feels right. It's like a pair of pants you've owned for a year. They fit you better than one that you've never tried that cut before.
Yeah.
I like the output from them. The fact that, potentially I could make use of my 200 f2 or some older lenses better. Well, definitely better than trying to adapt them to a Sony or a Canon or something was another issue. At the time, the R5, when I tested it, it had some really cutting edge things like 4K 120 and 8K, but it was completely unusable. It was really disappointing to take them out and find you could get a minute or two of filming before they would just overheat and need to be put in an ice bag for 15 minutes. And I thought we were past those days of releasing features that you couldn't really use with like the A7R2 or 3 when it had 4K and it would just overheat all the time as well. So, on balance, it just worked for me. But having said that, for my schools, for my photography schools, I'm often using 4K 120, or I wanted to get slow-mo, which is really helpful in making higher level production. And Nikon didn't have that, and the Canon was unreliable. So from late 2020, I guess, through to recently, I did also have a Sony A7S III in my bag. So I have to say, whilst I love the Nikon gear and I would still think of myself as that Nikon guy, even though I don't use the name, um, what I care about is what does the job for me. It's
Yeah.
on one hand, in my hobby side, I can say this probably sounds smug, but it's honest. I'm very lucky. I can make free time if I want. I have disposable income. I don't have kids. I can really shoot with any camera system I want for my personal stuff. I am not going to drop six figures on a Hasselblad or a Phase One system just for a laugh, but I really can choose what I want to be shooting with. So, but for my work, it is just about what is going to get the job done and make things easier, what are going to be good files that hold up for the kind of work we're doing. And sometimes it gets a bit difficult juggling the personal, the private, and then the really public, which is the YouTube side of things, where everything you do or use seems to have to be justified to someone because it's not what they choose to use.
That's right.
So I generally don't follow rumors. So people were more up on what the Z9 was going to be before prototypes came out than I was. But I was super lucky that I guess now that Digital Rev doesn't exist anymore, I'm kind of the only photography English channel in Hong Kong, which meant I got really unparalleled access to use it. I think some of the American channels got earlier access, but just got like a day or something, whereas I got basically a week to go out and shoot with it. And it now having 4K at 120 and 8K with no recording limits, essentially. I mean, I can do 2 hours with it. The A7S III could potentially do that. It was more prone to overheating than these are, but the battery would just die before you could get to anything close to these do. It was, again, just practicality. Now I've sold my Sony kit. I was lucky to sell it all to one buyer with all the lenses, batteries, accessories that I had for it, the cage and everything, all in one bundle. Because it just makes more sense to be using one battery type, one menu system, one card type, one charger, one card reader. So when I travel, I can do it all with that rather than having to carry multiple of things. And down the track, once they're available, I may even pick up a third one.
Oh, jeez, that should be illegal. That is just not. I don't have my first 9 yet, but
you haven't put your order in yet either.
I haven't on purpose because I need to
buy the
learn
lottery ticket before you complain about not winning.
I can complain. That's what we do. You know what? In doing the research, and thank you for being so candid about that. In doing the research and sort of doing my due diligence before walking into a camera store in Sacramento and giving them my credit card, because this camera and lens came from Frederick's bank account, not from Nikon or none of those other places, which says a lot, right? But before I did that, I did a lot of homework. And one of the reoccurring themes that I saw online in articles and YouTube videos, etc., where there were a lot of people complaining about the autofocus from Nikon, specifically on the 6 and the 7. Not the 6 and the 7 II, because apparently it's better, or it got better since the 6 and the 7. What are your thoughts on that? Were those autofocus concerns valid, and has Nikon caught up to the competition when it comes to autofocus and eye tracking and all that stuff?
So I'll answer that, but maybe you've covered this with your audience, but can you fill me in what led you to want to grab a Z6 II? Because from memory, you were a Nikon guy way back when I had hair, but you haven't been for a while. So was there something lacking, or is it nostalgia, or why did you make the move?
It was
the influence of my videos.
It was all Matt Granger's YouTube channel just sucked me in. No, you had something to do with it, but no, it's a long story, and I'll condense it. So, in the military, when I was in the Air Force, I did 8 years in the Air Force as a combat photojournalist, and all we shot was Nikon, right? And I think the last one I owned was and this was back in the film days, so I'm dating myself. The last one I owned was a Nikon F3, or I'm sorry, F4. I had an F3 in my bag too. I love that beast. So, in like you said, it's a familiarity. I was used to the system. I know where things are. You kind of know how the engineers were thinking when they put the menu system together. It just kind of works, and the fit and finish of the camera, these, specifically this 6.2, when I picked it up, felt very familiar, very heavy, and very not heavy in terms of weight, but it felt like a tool.
Robust.
Yeah, robust. Yeah, that's the right word.
Did
It
you
felt
shoot
it,
any DSLRs? Nikon
uh
DSLRs?
yes. So yeah, so here's the lineage. So when I left the military, obviously had to give them their gear back, so I had to rebuy gear. And back then, I think the best choice when I wanted to make that jump was a Canon, and this was a 10D. You remember the 10D, that era? So the 10D with a little postage stamp screen on the back. So I jumped into Canon and bought my lenses, was using it. Never really quite gelled with the system. It's Canons obviously are magical computer audio visual optical instruments. They're beautiful. But I never gelled with it like the Nikon. There was always some sort of gap between holding it in my hand versus when I'm holding a Nikon. So I used that, and then TWiP came about, and I really needed to do some video stuff. I really needed to jump into the video world. I'm using a Lumix camera right now to shoot this video on. I have another one back there. Actually, I have two back there. So I'm still very much in the Panasonic Lumix family. I love this stuff for video specifically, but making the leap in 2022, one of my things was, I haven't really shot a whole lot. I haven't done a whole lot of photography for the last several years. It's been teaching and speaking and podcasting and tutorials and all that stuff, but very, very few shutter presses, ironically. So wanted to get back into that, kind of be more like Matt Granger and actually go out there and shoot and talk about the stuff that I'm doing. So then I got back into it. Okay, let's do the research and figure out what is the best direction I could go in. I could stick with Panasonic and go full frame with the S1. I have an S1 and an S5, but I wanted to keep Panasonic specifically for video because they excel at video. It's just ridiculous. And I'm familiar with it. That same kind of creature comfort I get with Nikon on the still photography side, I get with Panasonic on the video side. So yeah, so I wanted to keep the Panasonic for video, but then the still photography, I wanted something that could just run circles around anything out there and just do the job and be familiar. And I wanted to configure it, all my U menus, just dial it in so I could just go out and take photos with and be happy with it. So that led me to the Z line, right? Or the Nikon Z line. So the first one that I got was the 6.2 or the Z6.2, which is my kind of my entry back into the world with a 24 to 72.8 lens, which, like you said, is just a spectacular lens. So that's my entry level quote kit. And then hopefully in the future, I will add more to it. We talked about this before before we started rolling, but I will eventually have the Z9. I'll add that to it with a couple of more lenses, and then that's it. So, for me, it's not an or. It's not you can use Panasonic or Nikon, or you can, it's Panasonic is great for this. I'm going to use it, to death for the video stuff. And when I'm in Iceland later this year, I'm taking the Nikon, and I'm going to shoot with that. I may take a Panasonic with me too for behind the scenes stuff, but it'll be the right tool for the right job. So,
okay. Gotcha. So, if I remember, thank you for that. If I remember your question, it was about autofocus on the
yeah, it was autofocus. Yeah, everyone's raving or ranting about autofocus is horrible on Nikon, blah 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 blah. And then if you look at the timestamps and correlate them with the release of the Z6.2 firmware update, then the reviews start getting better. After that. So explain. Are they up to par or are they still lacking?
So I think that's fair to say, yeah, the early ones weren't, well, it's hard to kind of think back exactly what should I have been comparing this camera to with that firmware versus what was Sony or Nikon at the time. But I think it's fair to say Sony led the way on that. Canon were close behind, and they're both spectacular in the last few years, and that, yes, Nikon was slower on that. When you think of it through, whether you're talking Nikon or Canon or Sony, or Panasonic, it really depends on what the individual is looking for. For some people, the value of mirrorless is they just want it to be smaller and lighter. For some people, they want the video specs or better EVF or whatever it may be.
Yep.
So, for if people what they really were after was that cutting edge autofocus, then going with Sony early on was the right move for them. If they were a Canon shooter and just loved the look of Canon, then that made sense. Same if you were with Nikon. Definitely the firmware updates for all the manufacturers, to be fair, have made a difference, but there were some big updates to the 6.2, 7.2 last year, middle of last year, that made a really obvious difference to the stickiness of the autofocus tracking and the eye autofocus, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I guess a big difference if you're kind of an old fogey like us who maybe was used to the 3D tracking on things like D850s and D5s, was that the Z6 and Z7 just don't have 3D tracking. So if that was the way you like to interface with autofocus, you lost that. So, it's kind of, I can lose perspective because I'm shooting people a lot. So whilst I've spent 20 or 30 years getting to a point where I'm comfortable to do that with manual focus or simple autofocus, but now having eye autofocus is actually phenomenal in some situations. Or if you're just, starting out in the last 2 years and that's kind of an expectation you have that cameras are going to do that for you, how you're going to view the offerings from each manufacturer is, going to be impacted. So I have to say, when I was looking at them at that time, yes, the AF on the 6 and 7 were probably still behind what Canon and Nikon were Canon and Sony were offering. But for me, when I was doing it on balance of what's going to do the job for me and what am I looking for from it, there were other positives for Nikon that outweighed that. And for me, that wasn't a big deal. Especially because, if I'm doing a production where I'm, let's say, shooting headshots and I'm going to have 2 or 3 video cameras filming the scene and me doing stills, having the video cameras be able to at least track the subject basically so that I know I don't need 3 operators to run the cameras for me is a big help. Yeah. At times when it's a really big production, then when you've got to think about, is everyone doing their job? What is it I need to be talking about? Am I blocking a camera? Is the model or whoever I'm working with comfortable and, looked after? Then having the camera have eye autofocus is actually a nice thing because it's the 15th thing that you're thinking about. So if you go to all that trouble, set up a whole production and you're trying to get everything right, but then you slightly miss focus, it's just like, now the final product looks amateurish, despite all of the work that went into it. So having that extra aid in those situations is really helpful. I'm not sure if I'm really answering your question, but I haven't, for example, compared the Z9 to an A1 to an R3 head-to-head yet to know, are they still where they need to be? What I would say is, and this sounds like the excuse that someone using a loser system makes, but I genuinely mean it, all of the cameras will do the job for you now. And if you have some experience shooting, you're so spoiled for choice that whether one is 5, 10, or even 20% ahead of the others, still they're all so far ahead of where everything was 2 years ago. I mean, if you do end up getting hands-on with a Z9, it's going to be like your last computer was one of those colored iMacs and now you're picking up an M1 Max. It's just going to blow your mind what it's capable of. In the same way that the first time I used an A9 or an A9 II, I can't remember which it was, at a sports match, and seeing the no blackout sensor and the speed and the tracking capabilities, it really blew my mind. I hate phrases like game changer because, when you've been watching it for a decade, you realize it's just cycles and evolution. There's no real huge leaps, but that was like breathtaking. It was something I had never worked with, but now they all have something that is similar to that. It's, if you were starting from scratch now to buy anything, you're so spoiled for choice.
I wonder if you agree with this, and I'm sure you don't have a whole lot of. Well, maybe you do have time on your hands right now, but time to kind of go through YouTube videos like I've been going through them for the last couple of weeks or month or so. What I've noticed is what I kind of, for lack of a better phrase, call genre bias when it comes to reviews, right? So, in other words, you'll get a completely, for the same camera system, same body lens combination, you'll get a completely different review from a bird photographer that needs fast tracking, and all that stuff than you would with someone who's doing boudoir photography or nude photography or landscape. It's all different.
This 14 to 24 is garbage for bird photography. I don't know why Nikon even made it.
Exactly. You can barely see the bird's wings in that. But do you find that? I mean, I'm sure you have to rail against that, because if you have someone that's saying, yeah, this don't buy this camera body because it doesn't work for me in my style of photography. Do you see that a lot online?
I mean, I don't watch that many other reviews, but I mean, it does happen, sure. But I mean, you have to look at any review critically. Like, you have to review the reviews. So if I'm watching, the example I always give is back in Australia, I'm a big film nerd. I studied film studies at university. There was one American writer who we must have the same taste, because if he positively reviewed a film, I always loved it. And then there was this TV show in Australia of two critics. I think you guys had a similar thing with more famous ones, but this was an older, there weren't a couple, but a man and a woman who would go and review films. And essentially one of them, I usually found I agreed with most of the time, but he was a bit stuffy. And with her, if she said she hated it, it generally meant I was going to like it, because there's just different opinions. So if I'm not going to be shooting birds, although I do like shooting birds, but for example, then no offense to bird photographers, why the hell am I watching a bird photographer's review of the equipment I'm considering? If I'm going to shoot street and people, then that's the review I should watch. And then it does pay to know, okay, so Matt is biased towards this, or Matt likes to shoot in that way, or Matt doesn't seem to care about ... So, but I do care about that. So let me check and find someone who has a similar view on it to me to get some opinions. And it seems that most people will go out and watch 10 reviews, and from them either find the relevant information or find the information that gives them the justification to do what they wanted to do from the beginning anyway.
Right. One of the things I'm curious about is, you have a lot of Nikons, right? So like you said, you have two Z7 IIs, you've got two Z9s, and God knows what else, and who knows how many lenses you have floating around there. But looking back, or looking at your Z6 II, when over the last, mine is literally like 4 days old, right? One of the main things that popped out of me as, man, two things actually that I wish this camera had that I believe they added to the Z9. Number one is that flippy screen, because I'm used to that coming from Panasonic, right? So the flippy screen, and then also illuminated buttons on the camera. Both of those things are fixed on the Z9, correct?
Yeah, so the Z9's the first Nikon mirrorless that has illuminated button option. None of the others had it. It's got a somewhat flippy tilty screen, but maybe not like the Panasonic. You can't turn it all the way around to see yourself.
Oh, okay.
You can't tilt it that far. So it will go 90 degrees this direction. So if you're shooting with the portrait grip, then you can see it, from down on the ground. And then in this direction, it's like 30 or 40 degrees. Okay. And then it'll do all the way to up, and it goes out as well. Hopefully that's coming through okay.
It is. Yeah.
And then down again, not 100%, but then so you can also combine those different axes to make it look a little transformery. But it doesn't go all the way around like, for filming. So
how robust is that? Like, how robust is that origami system? It feels like it would be prone to wearing out.
I would say similar to the Z6. It's got it at least goes up and down.
Yep.
That's that's always the quandary, and you can't make three variations of a camera to satisfy different parts of the market. There'll be people who wish the screen tilted all the way around, so then you could do single camera vlog style stuff. There'll be people who believe that every pro camera like a D5, D6 should have a fixed screen because it's a weak point. The fact is that is obviously the weakest part of the camera. If something's going to break, it's not going to be the pentaprism shaped bulge on top. And there is the small ribbon there that's carrying the data to the screen. That's potentially a weather sealing issue, or if that breaks, then your screen is useless. So there's three camps: one that thinks it's great, one that thinks it should be more, and one that thinks it shouldn't be there. It's
You're never gonna please everyone. Never.
Yeah, what do you? No matter what you do.
Having played with all these cameras, and now this flagship camera, which one? Like, are there features missing still? Like, do you have any gripes that you're like, I wish they would add this thing? Why haven't they added this thing yet? Is there anything that you need that's not there?
So, some people got really pissy about this. I think people who are still waiting on pre-order or who've just gotten theirs. But I actually did a video on the 9 or 10 things that I think they could have done better. Because, like we just said, no camera is going to be perfect for an individual. There's always going to be things that you wish were different, but they can't, unfortunately, customize it just for me. Yeah. But I made that video because if you're going to have any kind of credibility as a reviewer, you can't just say, oh my God, sunshine emanates from this camera and it's perfect and the birds sing whenever I take it out. You have to be balanced. So the fact that I love my equipment and that I'm getting the best results I ever have with them doesn't mean that it's completely perfect. So you just have to be fair about that. But some people felt it was just nitpicking little things, and they are little things, to be fair. The important things to me are all here. But let's see. Is this a good example? So the D850 or a D5, D6 has like 4 individual doors here for opening up your port. So when you're in Iceland next time, let's say you wanted to put an external an external monitor onto your HDMI. On this one, you have to open the Wi-Fi port and the HDMI at the same time, and then leave one exposed whilst one's being used. And then the mic, headphone, and Ethernet are all one port. So there's only 2 door covers. In the past, they had 4. And I would rather have more, so I can have less ports exposed. So if I want to use my microphone, which I always do, I have to have my Ethernet port open, which is obviously compromising my weather sealing. So I don't think that's ideal. What were some of the other ones that I went through? I'm struggling to remember now. But
it's like you're reaching. You're like, it's such a great camera. I can't find anything.
No, I mean, yeah, there are little things, but that are imperfections. But yeah, it's pretty much there. The door lock, it's compared to the Z6 and 7, I really didn't like them. The way, because I use black rapid straps a lot, so they're swinging by my side, and I regularly bump the thumb grip and the door just bumps open on them. So having I like having the locking mechanism, but now that it's fully on the side, whereas a D5 and D6, the cards went in directly from the back, so the door kind of hinged around. You can, and I'm getting better at it, open it with one hand, but it's not nearly as easy. I feel like it's more secure, but less easy. And for me, I would probably rather a better balance of the two. For some people who like it easy, then they'll hate this. For those who like secure, it's perfect. I feel like I'm copping out here, but watch my video to see the other 6 or 7 things, because I can't really remember them now.
Make sure I get that link, because I seriously want to link to that. I'll put that in the blog post and in the YouTube description. The other question I had on just sort of the hardware side of things is the lenses themselves, right? So we talked a little bit about the 24-70 2.8, which is this beautiful piece of art that I have in front of me. What are your go-to lenses? I'm looking at your videos. I'm sure you're not bringing out your whole arsenal of lenses every time. What are the couple that you go to when you're doing one of your projects?
I could have set up all the ones that I'm traveling with at the moment. But piece of advice for you and anyone else who's into the system and trying not to blow their budget: if you're not sure if you need the, you know, now they've got 1.8 and 1.2 50 mil and f4 and f2.8 zooms. If you're not sure if you need the faster one, just don't test it, because then you're going to want it. Same with the Z9. Like, I compared the 51.8 1.2 and the Noct all side by side. And it's true, the 1.8 is great. I think it's already optically better in every way than the old F mount 1.4. It is still kind of pricey. But then, and when I did the three-way comparison, I was like, I can see a difference with the 1.2, but it's not enough to justify the extra size and weight and price. So this is the 1.2. It's a fair chonk.
Wow.
But then shooting with it in different situations, I'm like, okay, now I can see the value of it. And damn it, there goes $2,000.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, well, I think it's 2,000 more than the 1.8 version. Actually,
Oh, good grief! Wow.
But so, like, the 14 to 30 and the 24 to 70 f4 and the 51.8 are all good lenses, and they're built well enough, and they're fast enough, and they're optically good. The thing is, like any smart company, they don't just segment the lenses by giving you an extra stop of aperture. The build and the focus and the overall image quality is better as you go up on them. The coatings and the lens design is more complex, and you get better results with them. Mm-hmm. So whilst the 24 to 70 f4 is a very nice lens, the 2.8 is exceptional. And it's really not about having double the light or that much softer background. It's the overall image is just exceptional from it. Yeah. So I would say now I have, let's see, what do I own? The 14 to 24. I don't have the 14 to 30. I've got the 24 to 70, both of them, both of the 50s, the 70 to 200, and the 100 to 400, and the 85. But keeping in mind that I'm regularly doing one or two video camera angles and shooting. So I normally use the f4 zooms and the 1.8 prime for video, and then use the faster, higher end stuff for the stills. But the ones that I would take out the most, it's still what it was in DSLR for me, essentially. If I was just like, I'm currently editing a shoot I did in a fern tree gully when I was up in Brisbane, Australia, when we were hiking, and I really just wanted to carry one thing. Then I took the 24 to 70. Yes. If I had my shoulder bag with me, then I took along also the 50 mil 1.2. And then the next one that in that situation, because we were further away, would be the 70 to 200, which is also just exceptional. Don't test it unless you want to buy one.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's one where pretty much all the 70 to 200s on the market now are exceptional. The 24 to 70, I think, is like an extra notch above the competition, whereas the Nikon one it's the best they've ever made, I think, but it's probably on par with the Canon and that kind of thing. I haven't done them side by side. Probably an interesting video to make.
Yeah.
But the 14 to 24 is also great if that's something that you can make use of, but you just can't get away from the fact that you're going to have perspective distortion using a lens like that even.
Yeah, of course. It's still hot on my mind, this 24 to 70, because you're right. It's a pricey lens. But my rationale was I need a 24 to 70. It's kind of like you say, it's kind of the must-have lens, in the kit. And if you're going to get one lens, you might as well get this one. But I did struggle, Matt. I struggled with this 4.0 is cheaper. It's fine.
Lighter.
Yeah, it's lighter, it locks closed, it does a bunch of things. And then I look at the 24 to 72.8, and you hold them side by side, and it feels, you can tell. You can tell that this one clearly is, not that they're both not professional tools, but you can tell that the more expensive one is more expensive for a reason, notwithstanding the fact that it has a screen on it and all these other bells and whistles. It just feels like a tool. The other one feels like a tool as well, but I don't know. It's hard to articulate because they're both, you probably couldn't distinguish an f4 shot between the two, and maybe you could, but I don't know if I could distinguish two f4 shots sat side by side at the same focal length, printed identically, could I tell a quality difference? I don't know. Could you?
So I that's what kind of got me on the 50 mil. And again, this
Yeah.
isn't some, all hail the gods of Nikon. This is something that all the brands do. In ideal situations, maybe not. And in ideal situations, you can mix in your cell phone and get reasonable results as well.
Yeah.
But if I'm shooting a backlit situation with a person, yes, you'll know the difference between the 1.2 and the 1.8 or the 2.8 and the f4. The flare control and the sharpness you can retain and the contrast you get in the parts of the shot where you want it, it's different. You can tell. And how well it's, we often think about flare of, sometimes people want flare in their shot, but when we often think about flare as how it looks in the final shot, or contrast, how it looks in the final shot. But you have to think what's coming through the lens is what the camera is using for its metering and focusing as well. So if you have a shot where you retain more contrast on your subject's face and the flare is controlled, it's going to be able to meter and autofocus better for you too, which means you get better performance in the field with that combo.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm trying not to test any more of these lenses because like you say, they're a little bit get that out of here. Get it out of here. Yeah, it's magnetic. It's magnetic. It is a rat hole for this stuff. There's so many questions. Give us a little bit of background or info on the training that you put out, right? Because you sent me a course. I don't know if you call it a course. It's more of a walkthrough of the mirror or the Z series of bodies that Nikon puts out there. What is that all about, and what's in it?
Okay, so that one, I don't know if you want to call it a course or whatever. I call it a setup guide. So I started making that one with the Z9 initially. The camera wasn't shipping with a full manual anymore, and it's just got so much new tech in there that people might not understand. And actually, the reverse thing, and I found this afterwards as people have gotten delivery of their cameras, it is a computer, and now it has triple the options. When you see all of these reviewers or people online getting astonishing results, and I see this in like the Facebook forums for owners groups now, people getting frustrated that they're not getting those results. There's so many more options that you need to have set up right that will take you from getting great results to like, oh my God, I can't believe every one of those focus images is perfectly in focus and perfectly metered and stuff. So you need to know what the new options are and how to actually set them up. So I started making it for the Z9, but before I released it, I actually decided, as popular as the Z9 is, it's still 5%, probably less of the total mirrorless cameras that Nikon are selling are going to be the Z9. Most people aren't able to justify that kind of a camera, so they're buying a Z50 or a ZFC or a 6 or 7, that kind of thing. So I then septupled my workload by remaking the course to cover everything. So for each of the cameras, and it covers every camera that they have out at the moment, and as new cameras come out, I'll expand the guide to include them as well. An initial overview to show you all around the camera and what the different physical options are, and then a setup guide where I walk you through, here's all the different things that I think you should customize to start off. Especially, there's a few clever ways that you can customize your camera and set what you want your eye menu and your custom buttons and stuff to be. And then on the Z9, obviously, also your custom menu banks. There's some little hacks in there of things that you can set up at the beginning that will then track what options you tend to use, which will then inform which make most sense for you to assign to custom buttons. Sometimes you come back from a shoot and you can't even think, well, what did I change or customize or dig into the menus for? This way you're like, okay, so I went to that setting 6 times. So obviously that's something I'm using a lot. Let's assign that to a fast button. So it does that for every camera. And then there's a complete menu walkthrough based on the Z9, because it has all the other cameras' menus plus loads more, talking you through essentially what every different option does, and how you might practically use that. So, do you want it to retain your focus when you turn the camera off and back on again? Should it reset to closest or furthest focus, or should it stick to where you were on your last shot?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. That from the title, sometimes it's not really clear what the option is even really presenting you with, but to walk through that. And then I've added extra parts on how to do the custom settings banks for the Z9, explaining the new autofocus modes and a couple of other things like that. So it's kind of an evolving course where as new cameras or significant firmware updates come that add new features, I'll add that. And then people who are already subscribed will just have access to all the new stuff as well.
Yeah, I love that. It's very helpful. And I was in it as early as, or as recently as this morning, and going through and setting things up. And you're right. There's some menu selections in there that are, what does this mean?
Or
But
even if you can tell what it's doing, to think like, when would that be useful?
right, right.
Can be confusing.
The part that I was struggling with that I think I have figured out thanks to you was the U menus, the custom user menus in there. It didn't click with me that when you switch from video mode to still mode, you get a whole new set of U menus that you can set up, right?
Which can kind of take you it can take a bit more time to set up, but it literally doubles the amount of customization you can do if you and people generally are shooting things in a different way. Well, you will be, right? Because even if you're shooting yourself vlogging, or you're shooting portraits and you go from stills to video, you then need to think about, so what video format and frame rate and what shutter speed do I want with that? And, I might be shooting my portraits for a little bit of motion at a 60th of a second, but if I'm doing slow motion video, I need it to be starting out at 1/250th or something. To have all of that separated is good. And if, like me, you often shoot your portraits with a black and white preview, to then it'll save the JPEGs black and white, but your RAW obviously is intact. You don't really want to switch to video mode and then filming black and white video. So having that revert back to a flat color profile or one of the log formats is, what you want from it. So they really are, I think you misspoke earlier, but you're right. They're computers now, and you have to spend, if you want to get the most out of them, you have to spend the time with it. I really mean it. When you just pick up the Z9 in store, in shitty lighting, in your local camera store with just your friendly salesman in front of you, you'll already be blown away by the tracking. But if you actually take the time to figure out what the different modes do, and I was speaking to someone about how they'd been struggling with shooting small birds in a busy background, and you need different focus modes for it. What's going to work for a single person doing twirls, or a group shot, but you want to focus on one person, or a busy intersection of people, or a bird flying in the sky, or a bird that's tiny in the frame amongst a bunch of foliage. Different focus modes are there, like by design, to give you the right results in different situations. So it's either you need to spend the time to test every mode in every situation, or hopefully the guide will help.
Yeah, very cool. Well, so I know we have to wrap up here because you have to get back to your coffee and the ramen noodle cup there.
I have to get back here to feeling sorry for myself for another 6 days. Yes, please, Let's rush.
You got to get back to the violins over there, the COVID violins. I'm on your site right now, and it's at mattgranger.com if folks want to go check it out. And I see that there's something called the Matt Granger course, or the Granger curse. I mean, what is the Granger curse? What's that about? Is that like Montezuma?
Kind of. I did have a touch of that when I was in Thailand. No, I was. So thanks for plugging the website. The mattgranger.com is where I put all of my YouTube videos and share different content. People can check that out. Like, I have literally over 1,000 YouTube videos and tutorials there that are all for free. And then I've got my 2 schools. So one is learn.mattgranger.com. It'll actually take you to a standalone site where I've got courses on lighting and business and how to shoot weddings and macro photography and all kinds of general photography topics, starting from 101 intro courses through to really advanced specific things. And then I've got another one which is specifically for, people 18, 21 and above, which is about artistic nude portraiture, which is learn.artnudeportraiture.com. And I split those two out, even though they're based on the same platform. I thought it just makes sense because some people are only interested in one or the other. And if you want to check out my latest course about natural and available light whilst you're on your work lunch break, you might not want to have one coming up about steampunk nude photography coming up on your desktop. So having them at discrete sites. But the curse. So here's my... I can't even remember. Did I tell you how I ended up in quarantine, or did we not discuss that on this? Okay, so the really express version. I went home for Christmas to Australia to surprise my parents. They didn't know I was coming. I hadn't been back for like 3 years because of the travel restrictions, and Australia was closed. So I was able to get back in. There was it was like a comedy movie, the series of errors of things that went wrong on my trip, but I won't get into all of them. But long story short, saw the family, had an amazing time, but then Hong Kong wasn't letting flights back from Australia because it had a big outbreak. So essentially I had to find a country that would let Australians in. There's not many, and those that do, you probably don't want to go right now. And then which of those countries would Hong Kong let me back in from? And so it ended up Thailand was the best option. And originally it was going to be 3 weeks in Thailand and then 3 weeks in quarantine. Whilst I was in Thailand, Hong Kong updated their policy, so it was 2 and 2. So I was in Thailand for 2 weeks, basically treading water to get home. But I did line up some shoots there, and I was doing a shoot in Bangkok at an abandoned textile factory with a model. And I stepped on a gigantic freaking nail that went straight into the heel of my foot.
Oh.
So that was the curse, my being too focused on shooting and not focused enough on the surroundings. It's not actually, I'm just clumsy, but I don't regularly step on nails. But so that was fun. That was about 3 days before I was due to fly back to Hong Kong, and it meant a trip to a Bangkok emergency room and a few hours at the hospital, and then canceling my next shoot, which had like 5 models and assistants and transportation and catering. I had to just shit can the whole thing because I couldn't walk, and my shoe was filling up with blood.
Oh my God. Yeah, I can imagine the shots, right? Tetanus and all that stuff.
Yeah, just tetanus and antibiotics.
Yeah. Oof. Never a dull moment with Matt Granger. You remember that project you were working on a couple years ago? I think you finished it up when you were doing nudes in public places, kind of stealthily. You remember? Mm-hmm. Is that completed? And if so, do you plan on doing version 2 of that?
That show. This really feels like I gave you that as a Dorothy Dixer. Do Americans use the term Dorothy Dixer?
No.
Okay, so that was it's an Australian politics term where like you plant a question with one of your party members, so they ask you and you get to say, well, I'm happy to announce that unemployment is down 3%. This totally wasn't planted, but that's cool that you remember that, and it shows how long we've been chatting for. So my second book of art nude portraiture was called Public Bodies, Nude in Public. Right. And yes, that's published and done and out there, and it's at learn.artnudeportraiture.com as an ebook. And it really sounds like I planted that question because 2 things. One, yes, I'm working on and hoping to release a sequel to that book this year. I've got 2 books that I'm working on. I don't know which order they'll come out on, actually. But then the abandoned building is part of a course I'm working on long-term to release this year about how to shoot nudes in public in a safe, respectable, not ending up in an emergency room kind of way, which obviously might cut that bit out of the course. But no, it's about how to do it in a way that's, the MO for all of my shooting in public isn't about public nudity or shocking people. The whole goal for the day is 1, to get, to have a good time and for me and the model to both love the photos. 2, that, basically that nobody knows we did it. The goal isn't to offend anyone. We're not trying to flash boobs or privates at people who are walking past on the street. So, and I've been doing it for 10 years without incident. Well, without that kind of incident. I occasionally smash equipment or pierce my foot. But so how to do that to get the shots you want, to choose locations that are going to be appropriate, to know what the local customs and laws are, and then how to actually execute a shoot in a way that doesn't have people fainting around you.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Well, good. Yeah, I'm curious. I'll be curious to see that because I'm curious how you pull that off and how you. I mean, if
I'm
people
looking
haven't
for
seen the
male models
series,
in the Bay Area. If you know anyone,
I'm not doing it, but I might know some people
that
that
was
will.
a quick answer.
No one wants to see this action. No one wants to see it. So, but yeah, when you're
No,
here, we're
that,
definitely hanging out. No, definitely.
love to.
So,
The last time
well,
we hung out, I got kicked out of my Airbnb.
you did. I remember that place. That was a nice place.
Yeah,
We
we
got
were in the
kicked
middle
out
of
when
filming.
I was there. What? Right?
Yeah,
I
whilst
think
we were filming.
Yeah. Wow.
And that was fun.
Interesting. Yeah. Let's plan better next time, Matt. I think
Yeah, stay at a hotel or something.
just yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's my move right there. Well, cool. So aside from that, any parting shots you want to leave out there for the people that are thinking about moving over to Nikon, or that have questions about it?
Well, I would say that, I am, now that I have and I'm so immersed in Nikon equipment, I'm happy to take people's questions if they want to head on over to one of the websites or join in at YouTube. I'm always happy to answer your questions. But having said that, I'm not a fanboy in the sense of that I am just blind to Nikon's faults and will only spruik them, or that I'm going to downplay or talk negatively about other brands. Canon and Sony and Leica and Panasonic and Pentax are all making stellar cameras. So the only thing I really care about is that you're shooting with what, one, gets the job done for you, and two, you find enjoyable. Because if, that may be one of the intangible things that's hard to explain to a mass audience. I love shooting with the Z9. It's the same thing I got when I've spoken to some other long-term Nikon shooters, that it's the first camera in a long time that you just are like, oh, I can't wait to go out and shoot with this today. I'm going to stay out an hour longer today because I'm having so much fun shooting with this today. And that's what it's all about. So if you get that feeling from your vintage film camera or your manual Leica or your Sony or Canon, then that's awesome. My goal for this year is to get more access to Sony and Canon equipment here in Hong Kong. Not meaning to call them out, but yes, I am. Canon has never returned my messages in Australia, America, or Hong Kong. I just don't have a reply email from them, I think, ever. So I don't have easy access or ever early access to stuff. Sony in America was fantastic, but in Hong Kong, no dice. Fuji in Hong Kong has been okay, and Nikon has been great. So if I can get more access to that stuff, I do plan on testing, reviewing, giving you honest opinions on it. And I just want to put this on the record, I'm so happy and comfortable and comfortable in my purchases of my Z9s. There's no kind of, sometimes you see reviewers I feel have like a, what do you want to call it? Like an investment bias, where they want to justify or defend pieces of equipment because they've just spent this money on it, so they don't want to talk about its negatives, maybe because they just don't want to feel stupid for having bought the wrong
Stockholm syndrome.
Maybe. So I'm so satisfied with that I have no problem to discuss what its limitations are, or if, for example, this guy turns out to be better than it, I will have no problem to be honest about it, because I don't care. If this works for you, buy it, love it, shoot the shit out of it, and enjoy yourself. I'll be over here doing that with my camera. So thank you to B&H Photo for sending out the R3. I haven't even opened that box yet, but I'm going to open it and then have 3 amazing cameras here that I can't use in quarantine. And as soon as I get out, use them.
That's so sad. That is like the definition of torture. A photographer
I'm just going to do like bullet time selfies or something. I got enough tripods.
3 flagship cameras and beautiful glass, and you can't leave the room. That's like a form of purgatory there, I think. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, all right. Well, let's see what you can do. If you can pull off some sort of picture story in that room, macro and shooting out the window, that would be kind of amazing, A quarantine from my room of quarantine series, by Matt Granger.
I'll just go back to like what 16-year-old students start taking when they get their very first camera. So it'll be shots of my feet, and then I don't know, like developing prints in the corner or something, and
Hey,
lots of
yeah.
flare. Yeah, maybe.
Hey, don't
I'll
knock
just
the
order in
shots
a
of your
holder.
feet. The customary first shot through that 24 to 72/8 lens was my feet. I'm just saying. So it's
Well, and I have
customary.
particularly gnarly feet at the moment, so I can show you the top side, the bottom side, the discarded bandages. I
No,
think
you
you're
can keep
onto
that.
something.
You can keep that. You keep that. All right, Matt Granger. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate you. We'll be in touch. Maybe we'll check in again in a little bit after I've gotten some shutter clicks under my belt with the Z6 II. I'm really excited
Last
about that
piece of
camera.
advice. You
Yeah.
want a Z9, you know you want one, you know you're waiting a few months before you pull the trigger on it. You're going to have a few months wait. Put in the order today. If in
Oh,
3 months they say we have one for you and you're not ready, you can always say no. But otherwise, you're going to be one of the dozens of people writing to me every week saying, "Where's my fucking Z9? I ordered it 3 months ago and it's still not here." Just
done.
tell your local guy, put me on the list
All
because
right.
it could be 6 months. Who knows?
Yeah, which will be perfect. Yeah, it'll be perfect.
There
All
you
right,
go.
I'll do that. I will take that advice. I'll do that tomorrow. All right, Matt Granger,
Good man. Thanks again for having
mattgranger.com.
me.
No, you're always welcome around here, and we'll link to all your various URLs in the blog post for this episode.
Appreciate it.
Cool, man. All right, be safe
Take
over
care.
there. Take care, man.
Can't hurt myself much here.
All right. This is TWiP. This episode was sponsored by MPB, the world's largest online platform for used photo and video kit. Visit mpb.com.